Head west on Buckingham Avenue towards Henley Road. In 150 yards, turn right onto Dover Road. Turn right onto Dover Road.
To people everywhere. She had street cred, so to speak. And people loved her for
Continue for 1.5 miles.
her ability to kind of weather the storm and to be the calm in the storm.
Many sporting fixtures this weekend have been called off. They include the full football programme, with some rugby matches also ahead. Also this evening, in the last few minutes, the police watchdog has started a murder investigation into the death of Chris Carber. The unarmed 24-year-old was shot dead by officers following a police chase in Streatham Hill in South London on Monday night. The weather, showers gradually easing tonight, further spells of rain in the northeast, a low of 6. A drier day for much of the UK tomorrow, some showers developing in southern and eastern England, a high of 22 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
Hello, good evening. My name's Lewis Goodall, and how remarkable it is to be talking to you this evening in this week of all weeks, where for the first time in 70 years, I can say the words that the King has addressed the nation tonight, which King Charles did only an hour ago. He travelled down from Balmoral, where he spent last night, the first night as King of his country, returned to Buckingham Palace this afternoon, met his people at the gates for the first time as King, and then made his broadcast, the first time the King has done so since his grandfather did, George VI, in 1952. And what already was an pretty extraordinary address, changing so much of the furniture of the royal family. We've become so accustomed, haven't we? The Queen's reign was so long, so sustained, that everything seemed completely fixed. But of course it wasn't, because now we have lots of different titles, different people doing different things, and something that we're all going to have to get used to. So this is a little of what the King said about an hour ago.
This is also a time of change for my family. I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla. In recognition of her own loyal public service since our marriage 17 years ago, she becomes my Queen Consort. I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely so much. As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades. Today, I am proud to create him Prince of Wales, Tywysog Cymru, the country whose title I've been so greatly privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas. In a little over a week's time, we will come together as a nation, as a Commonwealth, and indeed a global community, to lay my beloved mother to rest. In our sorrow, let us remember and draw strength from the light of her example. On behalf of all my family, I can only offer the most sincere and heartfelt thanks for your condolences and support. They mean more to me than I can ever possibly express. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your
In a quarter of a
last
mile,
great
keep
journey
right to continue towards
to
Thames Lane
join my dear late
A355.
papa, I want simply to say this. Thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
Well, I suspect you'd agree. It was a pretty extraordinary address. And if you think about it, what King Charles, still having to get used to saying that, aren't we? King Charles had to do there
Keep right.
was he had to address the now ghost of his mother and had to provide a sense of, to the nation, of addressing the fact that she died, whilst also giving a nod to the future and introducing himself as king, which is sort of unusually difficult, the task for him in a way, in the sense that he is so well known, right? Everybody has known him as Prince Charles for so long. He has had the longest tutelage, the longest apprenticeship of any monarch in British history. He's the oldest king or monarch to ever come to the throne. But I think he did it. And there is really, in terms of what you've seen today, in some ways, what you've seen is kind of what happens when someone assumes an office. Somehow, and you could sort of feel it when he was walking outside Buckingham Palace earlier today, somehow when someone takes an office, they kind of look about 6 inches taller.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the first exit onto the M4 slip road to London Heathrow Airport.
They look a bit different. They're different even if someone is really familiar, and I think you saw that today. But of course the news element of what we heard was that, in a way that people hadn't expected to happen so quickly, the Duke of Cambridge and Duchess of Cambridge, as they then were, will now be the Prince and Princess of Wales. Something that office, obviously, the Prince of Wales had for a very, very long time, the King had for a long time, but of course that title, the Princess of Wales, so redolent of Princess Diana, so much emotional resonance, that title, with the British public. And it is just another change that has come and that everyone is going to have to get used to. I'd be really interested to know what that speech meant to you. Do give us a call, 0345 60 60 973, and you can text me on 84850 or tweet, it's at LBC. But first, let's get a sense
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
New King's residences and also the memorial service, which is currently taking place. First, though, to Buckingham Palace. LBC Charlotte Lynch is there for us. Charlotte, what's going on now at Buckingham Palace?
Well, of course, Buckingham Palace always becomes a focal point in moments like these, and all day thousands of well-wishers and mourners have been filing through to lay flowers and pay their respects to Her Majesty the Queen. But of course, earlier they were delighted by a visit by the new King, King Charles III. That sense of sorrow turned actually to excitement for a moment earlier when he drove through, having returned from Balmoral. Charles and Camilla drove through to Buckingham Palace, and for the first time he entered the monarch's official residence as King Charles, with his wife Camilla by his side. I have to say they were received extremely warmly, and Charles unexpectedly spent around 15 minutes or so as he got out of the car and greeted people, shaking their hands, and received their messages of sympathy and condolence, but also congratulations for his new role as king. People were pleased to see him. There were whoops and cheers from the crowd and lots of excitement as he greeted them. And as I say, it has been a sense of occasion really all day. People have been coming here telling me they feel like they simply have to be here. It's not something they can miss, bringing huge beautiful bouquets of flowers to lay in tribute to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, and also to send their good wishes to Charles and also the rest of the royal family. I've just been down in the crowd actually speaking to them as they heard the speech, the first speech by Charles as king, and a small round of applause erupted when that finished. And the general mood amongst people that I've been speaking to is that he did a fantastic job. He couldn't have said it more perfectly. He couldn't have captured the mood of the nation any better, and everybody here feels confident that he will continue his mother's legacy in the way that she would have wanted, and also the way that they wanted, in a way that they can be proud of and admire in the same way that they so admired Queen Elizabeth II. As I say, a very somber mood, but also one at times of celebration and of joy as well, as people are excited and happy to be here, to join together and certainly finding comfort in joining together in this way at Buckingham Palace to remember the life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. and also look forward to the reign of the new king, King Charles. They were also delighted by the news, of course, that Prince William from today will be known as the Prince of Wales, and Kate known as the Princess of Wales. Everybody I've been speaking to too saying that is extremely fitting. They were expecting it, maybe not so soon, but everybody here is delighted that things seem to be continuing in the way that the Queen herself would have wanted them to. Of course, at the same time as Charles delivered that address, as that address was broadcast, it was broadcast at a service of memorial that's being held at St Paul's Cathedral in London in memory of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Our reporter Emma Corr was there.
Thanks, Charlotte. Hundreds of people are gathered here outside St Paul's. A rather sombre and poignant atmosphere here. The echoing bells of the cathedral currently ringing out. I sense that people really had come here to reflect. There was little noise. People weren't really chatting, just looking up at the imposing building that St Paul's is. Some 2,000 members of the public attended the 6 p.m. service after securing a limited selection of wristbands. Many telling me on their way in they worked at charities in which the Queen had visited. One lady from Canada wanting to pay her respects to her head of state also. A profound moment inside the cathedral too this evening, just in the final few moments. The first time we witnessed a congregation singing the national anthem with now different lyrics. God Save the Queen became God Save the King. The Prime Minister Liz Truss delivered a Bible reading at the lectern, looking very solemn. She of course had her first meeting with the King a short while ago this afternoon at Buckingham Palace. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, Labour leader Keir Starmer, Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng and Foreign Secretary James Cleverly as well, all in attendance too. People were tearful in this congregation, a real glimpse perhaps of people sat and stood in peace, just sinking in that Her Majesty is no longer with us. People of course continuing to pay their respects all around the UK, including in Scotland, where the Queen died yesterday at Balmoral, and now to Balmoral Castle. LBC's Jack Foster.
Thank you, Emma. Yes, a muted and sombre feeling too here at Balmoral, where the Queen will remain until Sunday. Most of the families we know have already left. Early this morning, Harry left, followed by the King around about lunchtime, and William this afternoon. And we know that Balmoral was a hugely special, important place for the Queen, somewhere that she loved very much, and we also understand that this is the place that she always said that she wanted to spend her final days, her final hours. But also the people in the community in this area, the Queen was extremely special to them as well, and that has been clear as thousands of people have made the journey here over the past 24 hours or so since we heard that awful news last night. They've been filing in here in huge numbers. There is only a small car park at the end of the road, so people are being bussed in at regular intervals from the nearby village. Coachloads of people arriving to pay their final respects and to leave floral tributes outside the gates, and handwritten notes as well. So many of them, a few of them, "We will miss you. You helped us grow hopeful when we needed it." And over again, in every kind of handwriting, the word simply "thank you." So a hugely poignant moment here this evening at this place that the Queen loved so much. And we expect the crowds in places like London and Edinburgh, the big cities, but you have to remember that here at Balmoral, this is a very remote part of the world, and it's not very easy to get to either. And yet still so many have completed the journey, and still they file through hour by hour, day by day. A testament really to just how important the Queen was to so many, and the sheer impact that her death will have had on so many people too. Lewis.
Jack, thanks very much. Jack Foster reporting from Balmoral there. Just a bit of breaking news I can see as well. President Biden in Washington has apparently said that he will be attending the Queen's funeral whenever that is. We don't know for certain yet, but it's almost certain to be a very big political event as much as anything, with many of the world's leaders there. But first, let's just cross to LBC's royal commentator, Peter Hunt. Peter, you'll of course seen you have a lot of dealings with the royal family over many years. And Prince Charles, as well as many journalists, I can imagine, really, What did you make of what he had to say? Did anything surprise you? Did he rise to the occasion, do you think?
I think he did rise to the occasion. I mean, the most striking thing is that it was to short speeches from his mother. That will not be repeated in the reign of Charles III. I mean, it was more than 9 minutes long. She favoured brevity over length, he favours length.
But I suppose he had a long time to prepare for this, so I suppose he had a long time to might have a lot to say.
And he did have a lot to say, and he hit all the bases that he needed to say, and he covered all the points. And I think it was pitch perfect and delivered what it needed to deliver. So it needed to, and it did, pay a very strong tribute to his mother. Of loss beyond measure. He ended with a thank you, may the flights of angels soon be to thy rest. And what was imbued in it was something very personal about his family having lost a mother, and talked about how they owed their mother for her love, affection, guidance, understanding and example. And that is striking because in the past, when he was younger, he was critical of his upbringing. And actually he's come to a resolution with that, because it was a very, very heartfelt tribute to her. So that's the first thing he needs to do. The second thing which he did was to sort of the line and continue her attachment to duty and her strength to duty. And he said, I promise lifelong service. I will renew it to you today. And he said, I too now solemnly pledge myself throughout the remaining time God grants me to uphold the constitutional principles of the heart of our nation. So that gave a clear sign that abdication, like with the Queen, is not something that's on his
In
agenda.
2 miles,
And
at
he
junction
also
3,
strengthened
take the
that
A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
Making clear that his heir, William, will now become the Prince of Wales. Obviously, Kate, William's wife, will become the Princess of Wales. And he also offered an olive branch once again to Harry and Meghan, talking about his love for the couple as they lead their lives abroad.
Were you surprised, Peter, that he decided to make Prince William and Catherine the Prince and Princess of Wales so quickly?
I suppose it can come at any time, and I suppose from my takeaway from it is that these moments of transition are potentially the moments of risk for any institution. I mean, an institution like the British monarchy has been around for so long, it's weathered many, many storms. And so what the key thing that needs to be done in these days, as from an institution's point of view, the life of Queen Elizabeth is honoured, is that they make it very clear that the future is there and the future is secure and the future endures, as the Prime Minister Liz Truss said in the House of Commons earlier. So in making Prince William the Prince of Wales straight away, it just shows that continuity and that here I am, and it's an acknowledgement as 73 that he will not reign for long. And so here is my son, he will be the Prince of Wales. And all the other interesting thing in that is he talked about how they will bring the marginal out into the centre ground. They will help bring the marginal to the centre ground where vital help can be given, and that's what he sees as his and William's role. And the other thing that he acknowledged, and in a sense it's a statement of the blindingly obvious, but again I think it was that the whole speech was about reassurance. You know, you've had this reign of the Queen, I'm not going to come along and upset the apple cart. And so he acknowledged that he...
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
And issues for which I care so deeply.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the most significant things as well. I mean, obviously, a lot of attention being paid to what's happening to William and Catherine, understandably, but that to me sounded very much like a note to his critics to essentially
exit
say,
at junction 3.
Yes, I may have had causes and passions, and yes, people have occasionally accused me of interfering with political issues, but he was essentially, it seemed to me, implicitly saying...
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the 4th exit onto the Parkway A312.
And all of that, his role has evolved.
Well, if you think they've had a lot of time to think about this, and if you think that there would have been a checklist of the problems and the perils and the hurdles that they would have had to clear when this matter happened, and some of them were cleared in advance of this moment. So the first one was Queen Camilla, tick, that has now happened. She is Queen Camilla, she is his consort. That was sorted back in February at the start of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Head of the Commonwealth, that was also, it wasn't a foregone conclusion. Again, the Queen and her advisors in the background a few years ago managed to get that to happen, and it was never guaranteed that it would happen. I mean, there are still other challenges out there that we can talk about, you know, he's king of 14 other countries. It's not guaranteed throughout his reign he still will have 14 other countries. But then the other issue, as you quite rightly say, is the nature of him as king. He's constantly used to be known as a meddlesome prince, which he always denied, and the few times where he has spoken about it, he has constantly said, I am aware that I will have to be different. His supporters have said he's aware that he will have to be different, and as you rightly highlight, Lewis, in this speech he's saying, I'm aware I have to be different, and I'm aware that I will be different. Because what's also key is, in the speech, he didn't just talk about charities, did he? He said, and issues for which I care so deeply.
Yeah. To what extent, Peter, do you think it must, for him, it must be extremely daunting? In one sense, it's a paradox, isn't it? Because on the one hand, he's had the longest apprenticeship in British regal history, and yet on the other, he's also stepping into the shoes of a woman who clearly was so utterly beloved and came to define the role over such a long period of time. I mean, to what extent do you think he will feel intimidated by this?
I think it will be of considerable concern. You mentioned the shoes. I mean, just consider the size of the shoes. I mean, they are, as Sir Nicholas Soames on LBC and Global last night, talking to Andrew Marr, talked about how, and he's a very close friend of the Prince of Wales, as he was, King Charles III now, and he talked about there'll be very large shoes to fill, and that is one of the issues for them as they walk this
Exit the roundabout onto the parkway.
Where he will be in charge and representing the nation's grief as we mark and mourn and remember and honour the Queen. The more we do that and the more we reflect
Continue on the parkway
lost,
for 1 mile.
the inevitable then question in people's minds is, well, what is replacing her? So that also will be a concern and something that he and his advisors will be aware of, which is why I think this speech was so pivotal in terms of presenting him almost as a continuity candidate, in that we all know what the key thing was about his mother, this issue to duty. I am promising a lifelong service, and I renew that for you today. And actually, another thing we have